Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another Star Wars lore video. Today we'll be talking about a topic that I've sort of been thinking of for quite some time now, and that is the undeniable similarities between the Star Wars sequel trilogy and Dark Empire. Now, the similarities were clear as early as the Aftermath trilogy, and the idea of the Empire being purposefully destroyed, then returning in a new, leaner form. However, with the rise of Skywalker confirming what many suspected with the return of Palpatine, I think the differences now are impossible to ignore, so that's what we'll be talking about today. And just as a brief note, I don't intend for this video to fuel either the Star Wars Legends or the Star Wars canon haters. In fact, I hope it does the opposite. Maybe you can appreciate material which you didn't otherwise like for its similarities to something you do like. Also, I've mixed in some healthy speculation with some concrete lore, so I'll make sure I'm clear when I'm making guesses or assumptions. So the first category, I guess, of similarities is regarding the re-emergence of the Empire, and just generally world building. Both Dark Empire and the First Order Resistance conflict are preempted by a period of New Republic domination. In Legends, our heroes had recently defeated several Imperial warlords and of course Grand Admiral Thrawn, while canon, although we do know less information, has featured less Imperial warlords and put the New Republic more clearly in a dominant position. This position of strength, however, is eroded almost overnight. In Star Wars canon, we have the attack by Starkiller Base, while in Legends, we have the pre-Shadowhand Blitz from the Deep Core. Now, obviously the latter here is much less well known, but basically, after the death of Grand Admiral Thrawn, a gigantic Imperial force attacked from the Deep Core, blitzing hundreds if not thousands of New Republic-held worlds, and essentially putting the good guys into the position as rebels again. By the time Dark Empire starts and the real conflict gets underway, the New Republic isn't really a thing, and it's the military of the Rebel Alliance which is resisting the overwhelmingly powerful Dark Empire. Now, I think there are some clear similarities here. On a minor note, both continuities also show the New Republic specifically losing their capital. In canon, Hosnian Prime is destroyed along with the fleet, while in Legends, Coruscant is ravaged by Imperial infighting, which we'll talk about in just a second. So both canon and Legends preempt the major conflict with a culling of the Empire, basically a cutting of the fat. In canon, we have Operation Cinder and Palpatine's contingency. Most of you know the basics of these events, so I won't look into them too deeply, but basically, Palpatine engineered the destruction of a large portion of the Empire's military at the Battle of Jakku and other engagements, while allowing the worthy to retreat to the unknown regions, basically to restart the Empire. Legends had the much less well-known Imperial Mutiny and the Imperial Civil War, which was sometimes called the very contingency-esque War of Purification. I've covered the war in a dedicated video. To make it quick though, we see Palpatine first allow Imperial warlords to kill each other through infighting, then he very likely used the Force to cause Imperials to slaughter each other as old rivalries violently exploded out of nowhere. Only those who were loyal to Palpatine were allowed to survive and subsequently serve the new Dark Empire. Even Thrawn, in Palpatine's eyes, did not make the cut. Canon has a very similar merit-based system, with those not worthy basically being killed. Instead of going to the unknown regions, Legends has Palpatine secretly call Imperials to the Deep Core, where military forces comprised of hardliner Imperials were massed out of sight of the New Republic. Like canon, the galaxy was aware that Imperial factions in the Empire nebulously still existed, but had no idea the amount of coordinated assets about to be launched against them. Both of these rebirths also relied on secret hyperspace lanes. In canon, we have secret lanes plotted by Thrawn and others, while Legends has secret routes into the Deep Core discovered by Palpatine during the Clone Wars. Communicating this message is some form of Palpatine itself, whether that's a Sentinel as in canon, or a clone/representative depending on the person in Legends. Next, we move on to the actual conflict itself. After a devastating first strike, the Empire emerges completely dominant and powered by unbeatable warships and new great super weapons. The resurgent battlecruiser, like the Allegiant Star Destroyer and other large Dark Empire ships, became the new norm, while the Empire also employed weapons capable of destroying targets, and that's both fleets and planets from massive distances. We see flagships larger than any ever before seen in the galaxy, and the good guys are incapable of winning large-scale military battles. The Imperial force was constructed in both canon and legends by secret shipyards, either in the unknown regions or in the deep core, as well as assets covertly funneled out of the galaxy. The key is absolutely overwhelming force, and wars that will be won through interpersonal battles rather than the larger battlefield itself. But on that note, we also have a mainstreaming of the dark side of the Force. Now, this is obviously more present in Dark Empire, where Palpatine intended for his new Force to be controlled almost entirely through the dark side, but canon obviously has the Knights of Ren, Snoke, Kylo Ren, and perhaps others who are bringing the dark side into the mainstream. I'm guessing that the Knights of Ren will be similar to Dark Empire's dark side adepts, and that they will end up serving in some form the dark side and perhaps more importantly the reborn Emperor above whatever else. As I'm recording this today, we also learned of new Sith Troopers, which are described as the next generation of stormtroopers, a further iteration. Although I don't think these guys are force sensitive or anything like that, to have the Sith involved in your main infantry line, even just in name, is certainly a normalization of the dark side, and sort of using the dark side as a way to guide your government. But let's return to the interaction between the Empire and the New Republic-like faction. First of all, they have their capital destroyed, then they retreat to an otherwise unpopulated natural world after a destruction of much of their fleet. In canon, we know this is Crate. In Legends, this is Dasuka 5. The New Republic, or the Rebels as they call themselves, go here after the destruction of much of their fleet by one of Palpatine's Force storms. In both cases, their base here is eventually destroyed, leading to an overwhelming loss of hope. Although, don't worry, they do escape with some of the native wildlife. But speaking of Palpatine, what about Sheev himself? And obviously some speculation will come in here because we know nothing about Palpatine in The Rise of Skywalker. However, I think it very likely that, as in Dark Empire, he is searching for a way to return to full power or beyond full power. I think in canon, he will probably try to inhabit the body of Kylo Ren or somebody else, while in Legends, he also tried to inhabit a male Solo, specifically Anakin Solo, and this is after his prior attempts to return to life were generally unsuccessful. Yes, he was in a clone body, but they were rapidly deteriorating. That could be similar to his current state in canon. Yes, he exists, but he's at very little power. Basically, the main enemy here is not only Palpatine, but the threat of Palpatine becoming more powerful than ever before. Of course, Sidious was a puppet master. He's not the immediate obvious enemy, but I suspect canon will show us that, as in Dark Empire, he'd been pulling the strings from all along. One thing to note is that the LEGO description for the new Sith Troopers mention that they are guarding Palpatine in some form, and they also look like First Order stormtroopers. To me, that solidifies a connection between the Emperor and the First Order, which seemed all but obvious based on prior expanded universe material, and just logic, I guess. So, as Palpatine is lusting for a new youthful body, and I know that doesn't sound very good, a new Skywalker takes the place of Vader before eventually being redeemed. In Dark Empire, Luke sort of falls to the dark side before becoming basically the Grand Commander of Imperial Special Forces, even appearing quite Vader-esque in a vision to Leia. He's manipulated by Sidious, which has long-lasting effects on the character throughout the EU. In canon, we have Kylo Ren, a being who is manipulated from afar before falling to the dark side and developing, quite similarly, a love for Vader. Going back to speculation, it's my guess that Kylo will, for a while, serve Palpatine or serve alongside the Knights of Ren, perhaps creating the new line of Sith Troopers, before, of course, eventually redeeming himself. The reemergence of such a dark force will bring about a promise to restore the Jedi. We get this in various forms in The Last Jedi, but at the end of Dark Empire 2, Luke recognizes that the Emperor had been clouding his vision, then recognizes that the Jedi are the best weapon against darkness. In Dark Empire 1, Luke also says that the Knights will rise again, brought in part by the future generation of Solos and all the other Force sensitives across the galaxy. Regardless of the specifics, what I think both material will share is that the reemergence of Palpatine serves as an impetus for a new Jedi Order. Whether that's an order of something called the Skywalkers, as some have guessed after Episode 9, or something different, we've at least seen a new embracing of the light side of the Force, or we will continue to throughout the galaxy. The idea of a failed Luke is admittedly less prominent over the entirety of Dark Empire. However, what's equally present is the idea that Palpatine and the dark side generally can break even the strongest beings, and as we see in Dark Empire, even the machines of the reborn Palpatine give off a sense of despair. The new canon has also hinted at the fact that Luke's initial exile could have been partially due to Sidious's manipulations, bringing the two, in my mind, even closer in the line. I would say that those are the major similarities, and just to summarize, that's the reemergence of an extremely powerful Empire-like faction, led by a reborn Palpatine who had been manipulating things behind the scenes, involving a new Darth Vader-like apprentice, perhaps the transfer of essence, all which pushes the New Republic to the brink, and changing the galaxy fundamentally as a new dark side powered order arises from the remnants of an old one. There are a few other things which I'd like to mention. First of all, both series bring in new Imperial guards, whether that's the Sentinels in Dark Empire or the Praetorian Guards. We have a scene of Luke standing down Imperial walkers, and later he appears before Leia from across the galaxy, and we get scenes of transportation bringing people together, whether that's the Force storms in Dark Empire or the visions that Rey and Kylo have. The Rise of Skywalker teaser has also hinted that the New Republic may use Star Destroyers as they prominently did in Dark Empire. Finally, and I guess this one isn't so minor, I believe we will see an element of Imperial strife or First Order strife in Episode 9. I think the First Order will fracture after the death of Snoke, with Kylo on one side and Hux on the other, the dark side adepts perhaps moving between, the Knights of Ren. Very similarly in Dark Empire, after the initial death of Palpatine's clones, various dark side adepts attempt to sabotage his cloning chamber and get power all for themselves. This is only one aspect of intra-imperial strife, which appears especially in the first two series. But with all of that out of the way, what does this mean? What does this tell us about Episode 9? Well, obviously I think the Resistance will win the war, not on the battlefield, but probably in some form of concentration. It will be a battle of the Force, not military hardware, although I do think there will be a big battle concurrently with the last sort of one-on-one battle, just like in Return of the Jedi and with the Battle of the Second Eclipse. I think Kylo obviously will be redeemed, and I think Rey, after the end of Episode 9, will also go off to start a new Jedi Order. I think when Palpatine is defeated this time, as with Dark Empire, there will be absolutely no ambiguity about his death. However, all of that is just my opinion. Did I miss any major or minor connections between Dark Empire and the sequel trilogy? If you've read Dark Empire, did you like it? If you haven't, do you plan to after watching this video? And how do you think this impacts the future of Star Wars? I look forward to reading your comments down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell. But until next time, this has been your host, EckhartsLadder. As always, make sure you get all the Palpatine clones, and may the Force be with you.